The Harrod-Domar growth model focuses in on the savings and investment aspect of growth. In less developed countries, LDC, there is usually a shortage of investment, and because of this shortage, it will be very hard for these LDCs to advance in technology and experience economic growth. There are many ways to experience growth, but the main one is suggested by this model is that a savings or other forms of investment, such as foreign direct investment (FDI), increases the capital invested into production will increase, allowing the producers to expand and increase their output. With larger output and more surpluses, the average income will increase, which will cause the people to save more. This is a simple Harrod-Domar model. G equals S over K. G represents economic growth experienced by the country expressed as a percentage. S represents the national savings ratio, which is the savings expressed as a proportion of that nation's income. K represents the capital output ratio, which is capital put in divided by the output. Brazil have an investment of 18.5% of their GDP in 2010. Their total GDP is 2.024 trillion US dollars in 2010 and is ranked 104th place in the world. The real growth rate was 7.5% in 2010, minus 0.2% in 2009 and 5.1% in 2008. Brazil right now have very little national savings, and therefore their growth is heavily dependent on FDIs. The US is the largest investor of Brazil. Despite the 18.5% investment, many investors hesitate to go into Brazil because of the unfriendly environment for business and the lack of trade treaties with other countries. The Lewis dual sector model, or structural transformation, focuses on the movement of labor from rural areas to urban areas. This model is based on how the rural areas have a lot of excess labor, and even if much of it is moved to the urban areas, it would not impact the production of agricultural goods. These excess labor in rural areas have very little income, and the production process are relatively less efficient. So the labor in the rural sector can be moved to the urban sector and work more efficiently while earning about 30% higher income. The factories in urban sectors will now have very cheap labor and therefore can make a very good profit, which they invest back into the sector and continue to expand and employ more of these excess labor. This cycle will continue until the amount of labor in the rural sector gets to a point that will decrease the output of agricultural goods. Brazil's agriculture takes up 20% of Brazil's labor force, but only generates 6.1% of Brazil's GDP, while the industries takes up 14% of labor and generates 26.4% of Brazil's GDP. This shows that there is still room for dual sector model to be applied. If more labor working under agriculture moves into the industry sector, then the GDP will rise sharply, and with increased GDP and profit that the individuals made, there will be more investment into technological advances which could potentially free up more agricultural labor. The downside to applying this model is that this model has limitations and assumptions that are not always true. For example, this model assumes that the profits will be invested back into the economy. Sometimes the investors just take them and leaves. A major downside to this model is that this model only focuses on growth, such as the raising of GDP, increasing the rate of urbanization, and increasing productivity, while not considering the development aspects. Many factories actually invest into labor-saving capitals and therefore increase unemployment. Brazil's unemployment rate is also very high at 26% compared to 9.6% of Canada and 12% of US. This shows that this model will not help with the development of Brazil, but only focuses on the economic growth. Another model that will help the growth and development of Brazil would be an endogenous growth model. This model focuses on the measuring policies that will have positive or negative impacts on the growth rate of an economy and encourages innovation within the nation. Examples of these policies would be subsidies to research and development, public education, and universal health care. Brazil has many beneficial policies such as the universal health care policy. This policy will allow people to have stability and thus being able to focus on their work and not worry too much about suddenly having a health problem that would drain all their savings and money. Brazil also have decent education policies in place. For kids ages 6 to 14, education is mandatory. This could be improved upon by raising the age to 18. Brazil encourages innovation with their education policies by making all their education levels free, except for the private universities. The IMF, International Monetary Fund, and the Brazil have been having conflicts for some time. This year, IMF blames Brazil, along with many countries, for increasing their spending, while Brazil refuses IMF's capital control. The International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, or the World Bank, along with the International Development Association, IDA, have been lending increasing amounts of money to Brazil. In 2006, they lent $9.7 billion. In 2007, they lent $9.7 billion again, and in 2008, they lent $10.7 billion. The IDA lends at concessional rates, while the IBRD gives loans at the market rate. Brazil's first microlending institution was established in 1978. The institution did not really grow dramatically in size or numbers until 2002 when President Lula was elected. President Lula promised to expand the microfinance industry and since had increased the numbers of institutions from 159,000 to 809,000. The amount of money lent out also increased by $775 million.